Here at Superbooth 2018 with Paul Soulsby. It's great to see a keyboard that's different. I kind of don't know how it is. Well, I know what it is, and you can tell us, but just on the front, it's different. It's not a polysynth or a mono in terms of vintage analog replication. I guess tell us what it is.
It's basically 8 Atmegatrons in a box with 8 analog VC filters and 8 analog VCAs, all under digital control with the keyboard and the joystick, all using this new interface, digital interface to control all the elements of the synth. And the way it varies from a typical polysynth is in the way that you can actually load any firmware version onto any voice. So at the moment it's in its most basic form, 8 Atmegatrons being an 8-voice polysynth.
Yeah.
The VCA module also has built-in effects as well, using the famous FE1 processor. Although that has a nice quirk to it, is that we got a micro SD port just there. The Spin FE1 is an open source platform that you can write your own effects. So I'll have it so that you can put those on the micro SD and then upload them to the processor, so you can have custom effects as well.
It's really rare you see an 8-voice, especially a keyboard that has 8 full lots of control into the voice.
Yeah, so the idea is that this is actually more of a workstation. I'm imagining it for live performance, a live performance workstation. So maybe a typical configuration would be maybe 3 or 4 voices of polysynth for doing chords and pads, and then maybe 2 for drums. Each drum can do 8 sounds, so you'd have...
is that running the oscidrum firmware on a single voice?
Exactly, yeah. So you'd load 2 lots of oscidrums, maybe an odytron in there for a nice rounded bass line, and maybe top it up, maybe the strings on the last one. Just an example, but actually you can load anything to anything. You could have 8 drum machines all loaded if you wanted.
So as well as obviously all the Euro connectivity, is it MIDI channel splits to control these in certain modes, or how's it addressed over MIDI or USB?
Yeah, it's using MPE as its standard, which is a sort of it's a new standard for multi-channel MIDI, where you're splitting the channels into what are called zones, and it just so happened that new standard was going to work perfectly for my needs, in that you could have 4 voices as a zone, as one sound, and maybe 2 in another, and so on. So what you have an editor screen where you set up your zones and the firmware in the zones, and then you click a button and internally it will upload it. No more FTDI cables. It all is done off the micro SD internally.
Okay, great. So obviously outputs are outputs, but what are the inputs to each voice? Is this into the digital filter and the analog filter and the effects?
This is into the Atmega card. It's very similar to the oscitron input, although so you'll be able to do that wavetable sampling, and you remember the continuous sampling effect that sounds a bit like a vocoder.
Yeah, like a live, gritty, distorted vocoder with, like you said, the continuous in as opposed to a sample to create a wave.
And I've actually included a little mic amp at the far end for that very reason, that if you wanted to use one of them as a vocal effect, so you could do a little tune with a mic doing like a vocoder effect, you've got a mic amp there ready to stick a bendy mic in, and it's all there in the one machine. The other thing it can do is internal routing for things like FM. You'll see, if I play a note, you'll see the red lights going. Now, the modulation isn't actually modulating at the moment, but you can see that you're actually routing each one to another module, to another voice. And that eventually, it's not ready yet, but eventually that will be various kinds of modulation like FM, with the idea that this could even do a kind of Atmegatron twist on a DX7, that you could arrange these into, say, towers, like FM oscillator towers, each one modulating the next. And create a DX style thing. Obviously it won't sound like a DX, but it's the same sort of principle.
Principle of stacking FM operators. So let's check out a bit of the analog filtering and the digital, get some different sounds.
Yeah, so I'll show you. So we got the digital filter on the voice cards, but then this is an 8-channel CEM 3320 card. So, and again, they're all individually controllable. So if you had 2 drum voices, you'd be able to sweep the filter of that completely independently to, say, the analog filter on your polyphonic pad.
Okay.
And you got different slopes and modes as well. I'm just cycling through them quickly. And some of them go very resonant like that one. The VCAs are locked open at the moment, which is, I haven't actually programmed the VCAs yet.
Okay, fair enough.
The resonance isn't dying out, but... There's actually 16, it's based on the Elka Synth circuit, which technically has 16 permutations, although they didn't implement them all. I've implemented them all for now, although I have to go through them because some of them actually don't let the sound through, so some of them aren't useful. So I think it's going to be about 10 or 11 options.
Okay.
And the VCA and effects, that actually I'll say with the filter as well and the VCA, they both will have independent LFOs and envelopes on every single one of those. The idea of the VCA is it's actually more of a mixer, so I'm imagining, you know, if you wanted to do a ducking compressor effect on a pad, you could actually do an LFO, you know, a sawtooth LFO.
If one's a drum voice, you can duck that against the pads or the bass.
That's how I'm imagining it to be used. Slightly more of a mixer than a traditional VCA, but it can be used either way.
So this is obviously very early in terms of its production. I mean, are you aiming for anything specific with this, or just wanting to show what you were working on so far?
The aim, I think it became apparent. I was aiming to have it finished for Superbooth, but it became apparent that it wasn't going to happen. So I was just keen to have something that showed the feel of the synth off, even though I'd say it's only about 5% complete in terms of features.
As I said, it's exciting to see a completely different take on a polysynth.
Yeah, I wanted to be able to demo, you know, show what it was going to be like eventually, even if it's not. I'm aiming hopefully to do a full demo of features at Synthfest in October.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks for battling through the acid attack, those guys behind us, and yeah, have a great Superbooth. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.